Hi, everybody. Today I want to share some thoughts with you on the subject of the pressure to bend, about compromise, and how tempting it is to bend when difficulties come your way and my way. Will Rogers said one time, he said, lead your life so you wouldn't be ashamed to sell your family parrot to the town gossip. Think about that a minute. How many things have gone on in your house and my house that maybe we wouldn't want to share with the public too much? I wonder how many times people you know have been tempted to take shortcuts when really shortcuts were not necessary at all, because they knew that if they would do it the right way, it might take a little longer to get done what you needed done, but certainly it wasn't as difficult as they might think. About that a minute. Integrity always wins. It might not win in the way you and I think, or might not win the way you and I expect, but in time, integrity does win. During his time as a rancher, Theodore Roosevelt and one of his cowpunchers lassoed a maverick steer. They lit a fire and prepared the branding irons. The part of the range that we're on was claimed by Gregor Lane, one of Roosevelt's neighbors. And according to the cattleman's rule, the steer therefore belonged to the neighbor, George or Gregor. And his cowboy applied the brand, but Roosevelt said, wait a minute, wait. Shouldn't this be the neighbor's brand? That's all right, boss, said the cowboy, but you're putting on my brand, Roosevelt said. That's right, said the man. Drop that iron, Roosevelt demanded, and get back to the ranch and get out. I don't need you anymore, he said. A man who will steal for me will steal from me. You know, you can tell a lot about a person by their actions, not only by their words, because you can learn a lot also about people's words, but you can definitely learn more about the actions of people based on what they do, not only what they say. Merritt Malloy writes, compromise is simply changing the question to fit the answer. Again, compromise is simply changing the question to fit the answer. And I wonder if sometimes you and I are tempted to take shortcuts to get to a place in our lives that maybe if we would take the long route, it would take too long, at least in our own minds. Joyce Meyer said one time, compromise means to go just a little bit below what you know is right. Again, compromise means just to go a little bit below what you know is right. Chuck Swindoll shares a story. He says, when Ralph Houck was manager of the New York Yankees, baseball schedules were even more exacting than they are now. With doubleheaders almost every week, occasionally a player would get sick of the grind and approach Houck and asking for the permission to set out a game. I know how you feel, the manager said generally, and sure, take this day off, but do me a favor. You're in the starting lineup, just play one inning. Then skip the rest of the game. So the player would honor Houck's request and almost invariably get caught up in the spirit of the game and play it out to the end. I wonder how many times you and I are tempted to just go halfway or not even really get started when we're supposed to stay in the game to the end. You know how hard it is to stand up for what's right when the waves and the difficulties of people going on around you are heading in the opposite direction. I can remember years ago when I was about 22, 23 years old. I was put in a situation where everybody around me was going one direction, and out of about 35 people or so, I was the only one that said, I'm not going to go that direction. And I caught so much heat from my boss at the time, because I was the oddball. I was the only one that decided that for me, that path would compromise my integrity. So I stood up to it and I didn't bend, but let me tell you, the heat from people around me was pretty intense. Now, there's some people who, or at least some bosses, want to know what qualities that irritate employers a whole lot. There's an organization called the Burke Marketing Research Group that shares the 7 deadly sins of people that irritate bosses. Let me just share a few of them. Number 1 is irresponsibility and goofing off and doing personal business on company time. Think about that a minute. Think about the people in your own workplace that do things for personal reasons instead of doing what they're paid to do, which is really stealing from the boss, because the boss is paying you to do your job. Number 2 is arrogance and ego problems and aggressiveness. Number 3 is absenteeism and lateness. You know, if you and I would treat our boss's business as if it's our business, I think it'll change an entire mindset on how we act and how we behave and what our work ethic is at work. Number 4 is not following company policy. I've seen some shows on TV where some of the employees bend the rules and they change the rules because they don't like the rules. Well, you know, you didn't set the rules. You didn't design the rules. So it's up to us as employees to follow what the rules are. Number 5 is creating an atmosphere of distrust. How many times haven't you seen people that are in your company or former employers that create a level of distrust by maybe gossiping about other people in the office? How about whining and complaining? You know how fast that can spread in an office? When I start whining about this person and complaining about that person instead of praising them and lifting them up. Again, this all goes back to integrity. How about the lack of commitment to complete a job correctly? How many people do you know who do a job just to get it done instead of doing a job with excellence? It's so hard to find people that do a job with excellence. Frederick Douglass wrote, "I prefer to be true to myself, even at the hazard of incurring the ridicule of others, rather than to be false and to incur my own abhorrence." Frederick Douglass, as you know, was very famous in the 1800s. He decided to stand up for what's right all the time. And sometimes, to be honest with you, that costs you something. Integrity isn't free. It does cost you something. Cheryl Hughes wrote, "The truly scary thing about undiscovered lies," listen to this, "is that they have a greater capacity to diminish us than exposed ones. They erode our strength, our self-esteem, our very foundation." You know how hard it is? Let me say this a different way. There are people who lie so much that they lose track of the lies they tell, and then they have to remember who I told what to and when, and they have to. It's so much easier just to tell the truth. Joseph Stoll tells of a conversation he had with a pastor in Russia that back 50-some years ago, and he was talking about how even though in the most difficult times in his life, he chose to do the right thing. You can count on one hand in your life people that don't bend, that people will have integrity in the most difficult times. I can tell you flat out that sometimes that is really difficult because the temptation is to take those shortcuts. I can remember when I was a kid, probably about 14, 15 years old, my dad decided to take my brother and I out to the track at the high school. And at the time I was overweight and not in very good shape, so they decided to start running. My brother was always thin and energetic and in great shape. Well, he started running around the track, and I got tired about 5 minutes into the run, so I decided to run across the center of the track on the grass and beat them. Well, obviously that disqualified me because I cheated. I took a shortcut. Kind of an example of what the lack of integrity does. You might think that you're winning, but in fact, you're losing.